So, I recently got back from a road trip through the Scottish Highlands, and it was an absolute blast. A super fun and inspiring trip. Since we did a road trip, though, it required a bit more planning than your typical vacation. So, I figured I would make a quick video showing some of the must see places, how I planned my trip, some lessons learned, and I'll share a couple sample itineraries as well. First things first. I'm obviously not a local, and I'll mention also that I primarily focused on the western side of the Highlands, which is what I personally was a little bit more interested in seeing. So, the first thing that you'll probably have to decide is how long you want to stay. This is personal, and it really depends on how much time you have and obviously your budget. So, I would recommend at least 5 days to get a good taste of the Highlands. You can easily do a lot more if you want a more relaxed, in-depth itinerary, or you could potentially do less. I would try not to do less, but you could see some awesome sights just over 2 or 3 days. I'll also just note that if you're staying in one of the big cities like Edinburgh or Glasgow, you can do like day trips out into the Highlands as well. That way, there's a lot less planning involved. Your starting point is probably either going to be in Edinburgh, Glasgow, or potentially in Inverness. Inverness is kind of known as the gateway to the Highlands. I think it's not really that nice of a city. It's a pretty average city, but there is a lot of, like, let's say RV rentals or a lot of tours that start in Inverness. They do have an airport as well, so if you're flying in, you could fly directly there. Edinburgh is just a super beautiful city. I know Glasgow is really nice too, so if you want to package it with a trip into one of these other cities, then you could obviously just make that your starting point as well. Inverness is all the way up here. There are some sites closer down here that you might be interested in seeing anyways, so I probably would start down here, but you could also start in Inverness as well. Another thing to consider is if you're going to be going in car or RV. Now, I really wanted to rent a Land Rover and drive it around and stay in the tent. It didn't really work out price-wise and availability-wise, and you'll probably also want to check if you're covered in insurance, if you're coming from abroad, if your driver's license will work, things like that. Weigh the pros and cons for yourself and the price as well. Obviously, staying in hotels is pretty comfortable and pretty easy as well. So, I personally like to start my planning by listing or mapping out some of my must-see attractions or areas. So here's some of the basic ones that I think for the Highlands. First of all, I don't think Stirling's a must-see, but it's a pretty cool little town if you're leaving from Edinburgh, and there's a castle there that has a lot of historical relevance. That's a pretty cool place to see. Glencoe and Fort William, Fort Augustus, this kind of area is where there's a lot of really beautiful mountains, including Ben Nevis, the tallest in the UK. This kind of area, you'll see that typical high mountain Scottish Highlands viewpoint that you're probably hoping to see. I think it's awesome here. A lot of movies were also filmed in this area, and there's a lot of tourist infrastructure, a lot of tours and experiences you can do for there. Also, obviously, tons of mountain hiking. So if you're here, you might consider staying in Fort William, the town over here, potentially Fort Augustus, or even just in the Glencoe town area over here. There's great viewpoints from the car and from hiking trails if you want to take a look at the mountains. My next site that I think is really cool to see is Eilean Castle, which is somewhere here, right there. And this is one of the most picturesque and most famous castles that you can see in Scotland. If you're into history or castles, I think this is a must see. It's probably the coolest looking in the country, apart from maybe Edinburgh Castle. But if history is not really your thing, I could understand why you don't put that on your to-do list. Next up, I'm going to say the Isle of Skye, which is this whole island over here. Obviously, we're kind of in the northwest at this point. The Isle of Skye is a very popular and potentially crowded place. I think it's worth the hype though. The scenery is incredible here. The views are just a little bit different from other areas with the sea in the background and the moody mountains towering over them. There's plenty to see here, from waterfalls to hikes to beaches. And I think the Isle of Skye is awesome. You could easily spend multiple days here as well. We only got to spend one day, and I really wish we could have stayed a little bit longer. There's crowds, but I think it's a must-see for sure. Now, I'm not going to call this a must-see, but the Highland coos, or Highland cows, are a real symbol of Scotland and a very majestic, beautiful, fun animal. There's a lot of animal experiences in the Highlands, so petting zoos for the cows, or learning about sheep, the shepherds, the dogs, the herding dogs. Not really a must-see, but I think that's a cool thing to do and just maybe something that you'd be interested in doing. Other than that, I'm also going to say visiting castles in general. So we mentioned Eilean Donan. I'm also going to say Dunrobin Castle, which was somewhere up here. Urquhart Castle, I believe, is on Loch Ness. Inverness Castle is all right, and Stirling Castle. There's tons of castles, so you might want to search a list of best castles, look through them, and see if any of them intersect on a potential itinerary of yours. Another thing I will mention just real quickly is this national park right here, kind of in the middle. Any national park is just beautiful in Scotland and could be worth a drive through for sure. Lastly, I will just mention distilleries. We didn't really visit any Scotch distilleries of our own, but if that's something that you're interested, definitely pinpoint some and add those to your little list or itinerary. Next, I'm just going to talk about hotels quickly. What I noticed while driving around, there were so many hotels and vacation homes all around the country. Not just in the towns, but randomly out in the middle of nowhere, honestly. And it kind of made me think that you don't really need a hotel in a town. It could be a fun experience on its own to stay out in a rural, remote spot. I would probably not prioritize getting a hotel near the attractions you want to visit, but more so make them near the route that you want to follow. So say you really want to see Glencoe, you really want to see Isle of Skye. You don't need a hotel in either of those places. Just put it along the route somewhere and it'll be convenient for you. Additionally, a lot of the hotels are really attractions in themselves, with beautiful nature views and small hiking trails or whatever it be. A lot of the hotels are really just a nice place to unwind and relax in the evening. Now, another quick thing that I will mention is food and gas. The gas stations are not too common, so you'll want to fill up when you can. For food, not many options outside the towns. I would recommend reserving at any sit-down restaurants, but for me, with the exchange rate, the restaurants were a bit expensive, and I tried to just eat at grocery stores as much as I can and prepare my own meals where I could. So once you've decided what you want to see and you have your rough itinerary, you'll probably want to book your hotels. I would recommend going on a travel site like Expedia or similar and go search on the map view. I think that's a really good way to kind of visualize where you're going to be going, and obviously then look up on Google Maps or whatever and see how long it takes you to get from hotel to hotel. Another great resource is the North Coast 500 website, which I have over here. And the North Coast 500, I'll touch on it later, but it's kind of a well-known road trip around the north coast, obviously, of Scotland. And it's kind of like this area over here. So it kind of skips Glencoe and some of those other places. But nonetheless, they have a really good website with some sample itineraries and this explore the route with this interactive map where you can search for hotels or other destinations in the area. So anyways, I think it's good to have a map handy when you're picking your hotels. Now, I will share my itinerary or a couple other sample itineraries that I found online. One was a 3 to 4 day trip, and roughly it would start in one of the big cities, go up to Glencoe, then Isle of Skye, then probably Fort Augustus, something like that, and then back down to Edinburgh. I think that's a quick way to see some mountains, and it's a really good way to get a taste of the Highlands if you don't have too much time. The other itinerary that I have is basic as well. It's the North Coast 500 itinerary, and that is a 500-mile trip around the North Coast. It generally takes you, I think, over a week. There's no really set time to do it. It could be 1 week, it could be 2, it could be 3 weeks. It's supposed to be a longer trip, but you can go as fast or slow as you want. Anyways, here it is on the North Coast 500 website. You kind of start around Inverness, go up over here. This is the Isle of Skye down here, so you don't totally hit it. You go a little bit north, and then you go up here, around, up the very top, and then around this side. It's a really cool road trip. If you go on the satellite view of maps, maybe you can, maybe you can't. The mountains are kind of on this side a little bit more than on this side. So there's like more mountain views on the west, a little bit flatter on this side. But it's a really cool itinerary nonetheless, and I think it's worth exploring. I'll also just mention that on the website, there's a lot of really cool transport services, cafes, delis. There's all types of resources on this road trip because it's such a popular one to do. All right, so I will now show you my itinerary, which was kind of a combination between that first Glencoe-ish itinerary and a little bit of the North Coast 500, kind of. So we started off in Edinburgh, and from there we drove through Stirling all the way up to our hotel, which was near Glencoe, Fort William area. So this day was kind of lost to jet lag a little bit, but we did kind of just drive around this area in Glencoe. We went on a quick little hike and then saw some views from the car and then called it a day. From there, we actually had the option of just hanging out over here near Eilean, but we actually decided to do Isle of Skye, and we did the store, the Old Man of Store, which is a hike. We also checked out the Mealt Falls. We had a couple other things on the itinerary, such as the Fairy Pools hikes, a couple of cafes, Dunvegan Castle. There's a couple things that we also could have gone to if we had more time or if we wanted to change up our itinerary. And then ended up in our Airbnb, which was kind of here near Plockton. From here, we checked out Eilean in the morning and then drove all the way up to Ullapool, where we were staying actually for a couple nights. And there's Ackmelvich Beach over there. There is some hiking. There's tons of different mountain trails to hike over here. Kind of took it easy. We stayed 2 nights actually here because we had a nicer hotel and we just wanted to relax a little bit. So just spent the time kind of wandering around generally. From there, we ended up going to Dornoch or Inverness, kind of this East Coast area where, again, we didn't really have too much on the itinerary, and at this point we were kind of tired. We took it easy here and got to explore just the town of Dornoch a little bit, which was a pretty cool little small town. Not too much to do, but it was just nice to relax in. And then from there we went to Inverness, Loch Ness, which honestly I don't really recommend. I don't think it's that special. And then from Inverness back to Edinburgh. So yeah, this was our itinerary, roughly 5 days. It was perfect for what we wanted to see and achieve, but obviously feel free to tweak this to your own personal needs. So the first thing I would mention is just the bugs. So Scotland has a flying insect called midges, which kind of swarm around you and bite you. They're kind of like mosquitoes in North America. You can get midge spray. I would recommend getting midge spray to protect against them. Next is ticks, and these are way more common than you think, and I would definitely check your socks and pants whenever you go near high grass. It's not just a rare occurrence, especially dependent on the season. You really don't want to get bit by one. It's not fun. Number 3, for driving, I'll just mention that the speed limits are high and the roads are narrow, but you really do get used to it. A tip for you if you're driving, if a car behind you is faster than you, just pull over and let them through. There's a lot of passing areas in Scotland. So also on these pullover areas, it's a really good place to just stop by the side of the road and enjoy some scenery and take a break. So when you're driving, take advantage of these, take breaks, relax, and enjoy the views. I will also mention that parking costs money almost everywhere, except for in those pullover areas. It's not expensive, but something to know. Speaking of paying for things, I will mention that I personally rarely needed cash. I know people love to carry cash when they're on vacation. I found that card was taken almost everywhere, including for parking. Another tip, cellular data would cut out for short periods here and there when we were in the more remote areas. It didn't really affect us because whenever it was out, it would come back fairly soon enough. But downloading your maps for offline or downloading anything that you needed ahead of time is not a bad idea. Another fairly obvious tip, bring your jacket in the car and wear layers because the weather changes fast. It might be sunny 1 second and then raining the next. An advantage of being on a road trip is that you have your car with everything in it anyways. My last thing that I will kind of touch on is my own personal preferences, favorite parts, etc. Glencoe, super cool, great way to start off our trip, really spectacular, and I really liked it. I will say the same for Isle of Skye. This was awesome, and I would have loved to spend even more time here. The Ullapool Loch Inver part of the trip was also really cool. This was a bit more remote, and it was nice that we kind of were there once we were kind of settled in already. At this point, we were more comfortable with smaller roads and with getting around. It was a bit more remote. This was one of the highlights for me, feeling like we were far away from everything. Now, I hope I don't offend anyone. I didn't think Inverness was that special. I feel like, it's known as the gateway to the Highlands, but I don't think it should be an attraction in itself. Sure, there's some churches and there's a castle. The castle was closed for renovations when we were there. I just feel like Edinburgh has more to offer than Inverness if you want to see history. And if you want to see nature, just go out to the nature. You don't really need to see Inverness. We also visited Loch Ness. I didn't think it was a very special lake compared to some of the really beautiful ones in the mountains. Obviously, it has history, and if you're interested in that, feel free to check it out. But I would not add it really to an itinerary. The East did have like a very cool kind of seaside vibe that I did enjoy. I think it was nice to end the trip there, a little bit more relaxing. But man, the mountains and the ocean on the West Coast are just spectacular. Anyways, I'm trying to think if I forgot anything. I probably did. So if you have any other questions or comments about the Highlands, please leave me a comment and I'll let you know what I think. But thanks for watching. Subscribe for travel tips, and I'll see you next time.